Hey guys, my name is Brandon, but I go by the name Cactus Juice in the Train Simulator community. I am the signal programmer for the Train Sim World 6 North American Core route, which is the New Jersey Transit Morristown line. I'm creating this video as a way to introduce you to the signaling systems used throughout the route. It's more of a walking tour type of video as opposed to like a instructional video that I've done in the past, so let's get started. So now I'm at the western end of the Hoboken platform. I'm on the platform for 12 track right now, and on both tracks 12 and 13 you can see these very unique condensed signals. They display all the same aspects as the larger counterparts out there on the platform and on the gantries, but in a much more condensed form factor. The reason for this is because the point of switch here on 12 track is underneath the Hoboken train shed, and obviously that monstrosity out there can't fit under here, so you need a smaller variant. Like I said, they display all the same aspects. The top two lights are always going to be red. The left one can be yellow for restricting or slow approach, and then the right one could be green for slow clear. Similar story with these signals on tracks 2 and 3 here at Hoboken. A little bit of a different story though, because there's no point of switch there. The only thing I can think of is that if you had put the larger signals up there on the gantry, at that point the tracks are too close together and you potentially could have trains getting too close and fouling each other. So in order to maintain that separation, they probably move them further back and had to use a condensed signal style here at the shed. I don't know why they decided to go with a different variant than the one that we just discussed on tracks 12 and 13. The bottom light can change colors. Instead of it just being a static color, this one can change between red, yellow, and green. So a little bit of a difference there. It's pretty unique, and it was pretty cool to make. The majority of the signals within terminal interlocking are these three-head signals, either mounted on the ground or up in a gantry, and they typically display slow speed aspects such as slow clear and slow approach. The yard signals at terminal are generally these two-head dwarf signals that are capable of displaying slow approach, restricting, or stop. This particular one is displaying slow approach, since the next signal, which is at the end of the platform, is displaying stop. Occasionally you'll encounter dwarf signals within terminal that have three heads instead of two. The third head is a green light that allows it to display slow clear, in addition to slow approach and restricting and stop. So this one is displaying slow clear. At the M03 signals, which are positioned at the west end of terminal interlocking, you can start receiving more favorable signal aspects than the slow speed ones we've been discussing so far. This particular one is capable of displaying clear, advance approach, stop and proceed. Right now it's displaying clear. I should note that for any signals like this that have a number plate associated with it, this one says M03, that means that when it's displaying the red light, it doesn't mean absolute stop, it means stop and proceed. So you are allowed to pass signals with number plates like this, as long as you come to a complete stop first. These signals are also at the western limits of terminal interlocking. They're on the opposite side of Hill Yard to the ones that we just brought up previously. The one that I'm being routed through right now is displaying approach medium. Just like the signals we just discussed, this is where you would start getting those more favorable signal aspects like clear and approach medium in this case. If we go to the opposite side of the signal bridge, this is where, if you were coming into Hoboken, this is where you would actually enter terminal interlocking. And the most favorable signal aspects you would start getting at this point are the slow speed ones. Slow clear, slow approach, etc. The M05 signals in front of us are directly across the yard from the M03 signals at the west limits of terminal. that we just discussed. These signals are nestled between terminal and east end interlocking. You can just barely see that signal at east end up ahead. The most favorable aspect you'll get here at the M05 signals is approach slow. Now, I should note that this is a rather uncommon way of displaying approach slow. The more common way that we've seen in previous territories represented in the game is yellow over yellow, or yellow over red. That does appear in this route, but you also need to understand that approach slow can be presented in this manner, especially around Hoboken. We go to the opposite side at the M04 signals. This is a similar thing. The M04 most favorable aspect will be approach slow, because the following signal at terminal is going to only display those slow speed aspects: slow clear, slow approach. This signal does not have a number plate because it is protecting a junction, so this is where your most favorable aspect would be those slow speed ones, like slow clear. The area immediately west of Hoboken Terminal is called East End Interlocking. You can think of East End as the sorting mechanism for trains arriving to Hoboken and leaving Hoboken. These three signals in particular lead to a 15-mile-per-hour switch right up ahead that you can see in the distance, meaning these three signals, their most favorable aspect will be slow clear. The signal that we're being lined through is it's currently displaying slow approach, because the next signal, which is also within East End Interlocking, is currently at stop. If we go to the opposite side of the signal bridge, we have three signals, all block signals with number plates M06. Just like with the single head M03 mentioned before over by terminal, this one can give you a clear aspect, but you quickly slow right back down as you approach the terminal. These other two three-head signals, their most favorable aspects will be approach slow, because the next signal will have an aspect no more favorable than slow clear. These signals are also at the east limits of East End Interlocking. They all have three heads because all of the switches are 15 miles per hour, meaning the most favorable aspect you can receive when switching tracks here is slow clear. If you are instead proceeding straight, however, you can receive favorable aspects like clear, like we have right now, approach medium, approach, things like that. On the opposite side of the signal bridge are the other M06 signals leading toward terminal. So, again, these all have three heads because the next signals at terminal are going to be displaying something no more favorable than slow clear, so these will in turn display approach slow. Skipping ahead through East End slightly, we find ourselves at Milepost 1 and the M11 block signals leading into the Bergen Tunnel. Nothing too extraordinary about these block signals. They're just single head signals capable of displaying clear, advance approach, approach, and stop and proceed. On the opposite side, though, at the west limits of East End Interlocking, things are a little bit different. So these are actually considered dwarf signals. If you look in the NORAC operating rules, you'll see different signal aspects for dwarf signals as compared to normal high signals. So even though these are on the main line, they are considered dwarf signals and will display the aspects appropriately. So don't get confused when you see stuff like green over green right here. This is actually clear. It would normally be represented as just green, like over there, or green over red, but this, because it's considered a dwarf signal, is green over green. And that's going to be actually a more common occurrence in other areas of the route too. These signals over here are a little bit different. This signal right here, the lights can display multiple colors. And then this signal right here, each light can only display one color. So that top light can be yellow if you're displaying something like medium approach, or red over red, in this case, if it's a stop signal. So you're going to find that a lot. There's a lot of variety in the different types of signal heads and lenses that New Jersey Transit is using on these signals. Some of them display multiple colors, some of them display just a singular color. They're dwarf signals on the main lines. It's a bit of a hodgepodge, and it just adds to the variety and keeps things interesting. Alright, first things first, please pardon the current appearance of the Bergen Tunnels. The light bake process is still going on and has not yet been finalized, so consider this still a work in progress as of the time of recording. However, the Bergen Tunnels have a whole series of block signals, and the head configuration is unique, yet it's completely deliberate and is going to make a lot of sense in a moment. The topmost head is yellow only, the middle head is red, and the bottom head is green. If you want to pause the video real quick, maybe you can figure out why on your own, but now I'm going to give you the answer. And the answer is approach slow. So you can see that signal across the way, I can't actually get to it because I'm stuck. But anyway, that signal is displaying approach slow. The head configuration on these signals is specifically tailored to displaying that aspect in that way, which is super, super cool to know. And by the way, the reason that it's displaying approach slow right now is because the next signal at West End is displaying slow clear. Alright, now that we're out of the Bergen Tunnels, I would like to welcome you to West End interlocking. So we have an East End, and of course there has to be a West End. So here at West End interlocking, this is the eastern limits of West End. We have a little bit of signal variety, just like we saw at the western limits of East End. A lot of east-west. Hopefully you're keeping up. This first one is very similar, actually it's identical, to the signal that is on tracks 2 and 3 at Hoboken. The condensed 3-head signal. It's technically like a dwarf signal, but it can display high aspects. It can do things like medium clear as well, so it would be like red, green, red, or slow clear, which would be red, red, green. It can do a whole bunch of different things, which is pretty cool. This little guy down here just has a singular light, which can display multiple colors. Right now it's displaying green, which is a slow clear aspect, but it can also be flashing yellow for slow approach, solid yellow for restricting, or just red for stop. And then these guys, these also can display multiple colors per light. They are considered dwarf signals, and they can display high aspects like clear or approach medium and stuff like that. Lots and lots of signal variety and lens variety and light variety. So it's going to happen more. It's going to become less common as we continue west throughout the route, but you are going to see it in other places like Summit. So it's just something to watch out for and get used to, and it definitely adds a lot of character and uniqueness to the route. So yeah, welcome to West End interlocking. At the opposite side of the signal bridge at the east limits of West End are the M18 signals. These are synonymous to the M11 signals at the opposite end of the tunnel that we already covered. There's nothing different or fantastic about these signals. They don't stand out in any particular way. So that takes us to just past Milepost 2. Milepost 2 is the little guy just beyond the bridge. And the middle of West End interlocking. West End is actually a massive, massive interlocking because it's where the Morristown line and the main line merge up together to go into and out of Hoboken. So these tracks over here actually start the New Jersey Transit main line, which goes to like the Bergen line and like a whole bunch of other stuff. You can do your research there. This is not like a playable part of the route. I think they actually walled it off and didn't do all that much of scenery at all. However, with the power of mods and other commands and stuff, you may be able to find a way to utilize this area of track for scenarios or just to have fun. The signals here I placed are completely prototypical and programmed to behave just like real life, so you're welcome to have fun here. These tracks, if you're curious, curve off to the left just after that bridge and go to Secaucus Station, but the lower level of Secaucus Station, if you're curious. However, this entire part is out of scope of this route, and what continues this way is the Morristown line. So when I said that West End was massive, I wasn't kidding. This is still like the middle of West End as far as the Morristown line is concerned. Signals like right in the middle of it. You can think of it as being split up into multiple sections. Yeah, it's a big boy. What's cool about West End is there's this Y track that connects the Morristown line directly to the main line. So without doing any weird like reversing movements and stuff, you can go like do equipment moves and stuff directly between the lines, which is pretty sweet. Right now in this free roam, I'm going to be switching tracks from this middle track. It's a 30-mile-an-hour crossover over to this rightmost track, and my aspect is appropriately medium clear. That's about all there really is to say about this part. On the opposite side is the same thing, but going east toward Hoboken. If you are switching over to that rightmost track there, that's actually also a 30-mile-per-hour crossover, so you can get medium clear in that direction as well. I believe that's the only instance where you would get a 30-mile-per-hour move going east through West End. Everything else, to my knowledge, is going to be a 15-mile-per-hour move, which will give you a most favorable aspect of slow clear, hence why these signals have 3 heads. A little bit further down the tracks, we come up to the signal bridge just before the Lower Hack lift. And this signal bridge in particular is the dividing point between West End interlocking and Lower Hack interlocking. So these signals right here go west toward Lower Hack, and then these signals here go east into West End interlocking. The reason that Lower Hack is considered an interlocking, even though you're not switching tracks, you don't see any crossovers down there, is because the bridge is capable of lifting, therefore creating a break in the track. So they needed to create a controlled point, something that could display an absolute stop aspect in the event that the track is not lined up due to the lift bridge being in operation. Here at the west limits of Lower Hack, the speeds start to increase significantly. Up to this point, it's been a maximum of 30 miles per hour. Things more than double after this point. Nothing too significant here at these signals. They're just normal one-head block signals. The signals going east toward Hoboken, the only notable thing to say here is that the most favorable signal aspect you'll get is what you see over here, which is approach medium. A little bit past Milepost 3 are the M31 block signals. Nothing too unusual here, except these are the distance signals for Sanfords interlocking, which is a bit ahead. Sanfords is only in effect on these 2 tracks, not the one that our train here in free roam is currently routed through. Basically, the purpose of Sanfords is to route trains into and out of Meadows maintenance complex. And on the opposite side of the signal bridge, the only thing of note at the M30 block signals is that the most favorable signal aspect you'll get when coming up to Lower Hack is what you see right here, and that is advance approach. There is a little thing that you should know with the safety systems, and that is you'd get the cab drop to 45 before actually reaching the advance approach. There's a lot of little stuff like that around here that I failed to mention before, where, like, let's say approach slow. That would give you approach as a cab signal when passed. There's a lot of little things in this area where you'll get dropped to that cab signal aspect before actually passing that signal. Now it's usually done by like a timer in this area, so like let's say you pass a signaling point after X number of seconds, let's say 15, 20, whatever the number that I chose is, then you'll get a drop in cab signal aspect. So that's just something to be wary of. It's something that happens frequently in the Bergen Tunnels. Like, let's say there's an approach signal in the Bergen Tunnel, you'll get the drop to approach in the cab before actually reaching the approach signal. Stuff like that is what I'm talking about. So now I want to discuss a signaling concept with you guys that is extremely prevalent in this route all the way to the end at Dover. You may have noticed these white equipment boxes scattered throughout the track wayside. Some of them are actually part of the signaling system, even though you don't see a signal here or see anything in the middle of the tracks. This type of equipment is called an audio frequency overlay track circuit. It's a specific piece of equipment that is used to detect train occupation within a certain section of track. So the way it works is you have a transmitter. Let's assume that this is a transmitter here. And then there's a receiver at the other end that you want to detect train occupation on. We'll assume that the receiver is down there at Sanfords interlocking. The transmitter is constantly sending an electrical signal at a certain frequency down the rails toward the receiver. When there's no trains in the area, that signal goes from the transmitter to the receiver completely unobstructed. Therefore, you know that there's no train in the area. When a train enters this section of track, the train's wheels shunt that signal, preventing it from getting to the receiver, and that's how the circuit knows that there is a train occupying that section of track. Well, what does the signal system actually do with that information? Good question. So let's say that the home signal down there at Sanfords is displaying stop. At the previous signal, you'd most likely have an approach signal. I don't actually have the charts in front of me, I'm just assuming. So up to this point, before the AFO track circuit, you would have an approach cab signal in the locomotive. Well, before the stop signal, you need to have your cab signals at restricting. So the audio frequency overlay track circuit is the mechanism that does that. When the train enters this area of track, the receiver no longer receives that signal from the transmitter. The signaling system knows that a train has entered that section of track, and it will drop the train's cab signals to restricting as a result. These types of track circuits are used all the way from here out to Dover for various purposes, not just the one that I described, and are an integral part of cab signal functionality in this area. Alright, so that takes us to the east limits of Sanfords interlocking. Just like I mentioned before, the purpose of Sanfords is to take trains in and out of Meadows Maintenance Complex, the east end of the complex. There's a 15-mile-per-hour switch here, and then another one immediately after the little platform there. That platform, incidentally, is just an employee stop. This whole thing is manned by a whole bunch of people. Those are their cars, and they go over the sky bridge, and they take the train and into that little station there. It's a whole thing. But anyway, that's the purpose of Sanfords. There's also this signal here on the outward track that governs how you approach the next interlocking, which is Meadows. And in this case, we are going to be switching tracks at Meadows, hence why we have an approach limited signal. Here, I believe we are going to be switching... let's see. Yes, we have a limited clear signal at Meadows. The west ends of Sanfords interlocking starts here at the track going into and out of the Meadows maintenance complex. You have a 3-head mainline signal here with the most favorable aspect of slow clear. And then a bit further down here, just past Milepost 4, there it is, you have a signal bridge which serves two purposes. It serves as the western limits of Sanfords and the eastern limits of Meadows. So instead of having two separate signal locations, because I know that these signals are kind of far away from the actual point of switch down there, they decided to install all the equipment here on this one signal bridge for efficiency, which makes complete sense. Nothing too special about any of this. Meadows has all 45-mile-per-hour switches, as far as I know. Let me take a look. Well, I mean, you have that switch to the connector that goes between Meadows and Cape, but for, like, mainline moves, they're all 45-mile-per-hour switches, hence why we have a limited clear signal, because we are switching between tracks here at Meadows. These signals, just west of the Meadows Maintenance Complex, connect to both the Northeast Corridor via this track that goes up the hill, that goes to Hudson Interlocking, and you can also go to the Morristown line at Kearny Interlocking via that leftmost track. This area is called Cape Interlocking, and it's a pretty vital line for things coming in and out of Meadows Maintenance Complex from the western end. Nothing too crazy signal-wise here. I mean, you got 30-mile-per-hour switches, so your most favorable aspect is going to be like medium clear, for instance. They're not used extensively in this route offering. I think there's one scenario that'll take you through here, but you're mostly gonna mess with this stuff in like free roam. That takes us to Kearny Interlocking, which has a lot going on that we need to unpack. So I'm going to open up the map. Tracks 5 and 6 here at Kearny connect to Swift Interlocking on the Northeast Corridor, which continues to Penn. So whenever you operate a service to or from Penn Station, you're going to be operating over tracks 5 and 6 at Swift to connect to Kearny Junction to get down to the Morristown line. Now there are other tracks here at Kearny that just facilitate continued movements to and from Hoboken along the Morristown line, which continue over to Newark Broad and beyond. There's a lot going on here at Kearny Junction. So we'll start with these easternmost home signals. This first home signal, I believe this is off of track 5, comes from Swift Interlocking up on the hill there, so you're going down a pretty steep grade coming into Kearny. And what's interesting signal-wise about how New Jersey Transit does their signaling, they will not use cab speed. So if you're familiar at all with cab speed aspects, they're used commonly in Amtrak territory to switch at 60-mile-per-hour and 80-mile-per-hour crossovers. Well, it's out of view, but up the hill there at Swift is a, not 60, 80-mile-per-hour crossover that brings you down the hill to Kearny Junction here. And you'll have a cab speed aspect at that point, which will soon afterwards change to a clear once you properly join the Morristown line. So, continuing down this track, I'm not going to be able to show it accurately here, but you'll actually merge with the track that I'm currently standing on, and that as well is an 80 mile per hour crossover. However, because New Jersey Transit doesn't employ the use of the cab speed signal aspect, you'll get a clear signal aspect when switching over at that crossover, and that's a common occurrence on New Jersey Transit exclusive territory, such as this. This also applies when coming down on the opposite track, which I believe is track number 6. And you'll switch here as well. This is also a crossover rated for 80 miles per hour. However, you'll never take it at such a speed. The west limits of Kearny Junction have a pretty unique feature, and that's this lunar light that can be lit. The lunar light is placed on the left-hand side of the signal, and when it's illuminated, that means you're being routed down the Kearny connection toward New York Penn Station. So you'll be either taking tracks 5 or 6 up to Swift Interlocking and continuing toward New York Penn Station. This track that I'm being routed through right now has a corresponding lunar light at the previous signal further back that will also be lit if this one is lit. These two tracks here do not have corresponding lunar lights further back, it's just this leftmost track. Not sure why, but it's a thing. When heading west, it's at the M65 signals that you start your slowdown progression to Newark Broad. You'll get a no more favorable aspect here than approach medium, like you can see here on the track that I'm currently being routed through. You're also going to start noticing a trend, and that is a mashup of different signal styles at the same location. So on this track here, we have a G-head, but then here you have these different color lights, which will become more prevalent as we continue west. I don't know why they decide to use different signal styles like this in real life. Maybe it's just availability of parts, but it's a unique feature that I wanted to get right. They all display the same aspects in the same way, so it's not really a big deal at all. On the opposite side is this other lunar light for the move over to the Kearny connection at Kearny Junction. So if you are being routed toward New York Penn Station on this track, expect to see that lunar light illuminated as well. Here at the east limits of Harrison interlocking, you'll also have a no more favorable aspect than approach medium as you get closer to Newark Broad. I have an approach signal right now on the track that I'm being routed through because my next signal at Broad is restricting. But just know that you won't get anything more favorable than approach medium here. If you are on this track and merging onto the 2-track section up ahead, your most favorable aspect here will be medium clear, because it is a 30 mile per hour switch. At the west limits of Harrison interlocking, the only real thing of note is that when you are continuing east toward Hoboken or Penn Station, this is where your signals will pick back up from approach medium to clear. So, as an aside, New Jersey Transit in this area uses approach medium throughout this whole area of Newark Broad to help enforce the speed limits. So before the creation of positive train control and the enforcement of speeds with that system, it wasn't uncommon for railroads to use automatic train control, which is the safety system that enforces signal speeds, in order to kind of enforce track speeds in that area as well. So this area of track, starting here at the curve, I believe is 30 miles per hour. So by using approach medium signals here, you're ensuring that the train can't go over 45. And even if you did go 45 through here, you're not going to derail. So it's just a way of enforcing speeds. But regardless, when heading east toward Hoboken and Penn Station, it's here at the west limits of Harrison that you will get bumped back up to a clear signal. These are the signals at the east limits of Broad interlocking. Nothing fantastic here. Most favorable aspect you'll get when continuing straight is approach medium. Still, they're using approach medium to enforce speeds. If you are switching tracks, most favorable aspect will be medium clear. Same thing here at the west limits of Broad. Most favorable aspect when going straight, approach medium, again to enforce those speeds. Switching tracks, medium clear. This is the signal bridge at Milepost 8, just west of Newark Broad Station. When going west, as you can see here on the track that I'm being routed through, you'll get bumped back up to a clear aspect. However, to enforce speeds for the Roseville curve, you'll start getting less favorable signal aspects shortly up ahead, such as approach limited. On the opposite side of the bridge, you're going to start getting those approach medium signals to enforce speeds as you get closer to Newark Broad. When traveling west, the M85 signals will start slowing you down for the 35 mile per hour curve at Roseville, which is just up ahead. As you can see on the track that I'm being routed through, I have an approach limited signal, which is the most favorable aspect you can get here. Just like with the M81 signals, the M86 signals will give you a brief bump back up to a clear aspect before being slowed down again to approach medium. This whole area to the west in the Roseville Trench has no more favorable aspects than like approach medium, approach limited, in order to enforce those speeds around the Roseville curve. This is the east limits of Roseville interlocking. If you continue straight, which is to say you follow the curve around to the left, that will continue down the Morristown line. However, if you switch tracks to the right, that will take you down the Montclair-Boonton line. So if you are going down the Montclair-Boonton, those are 30 mile per hour switches. Your most favorable signal aspect here will be medium clear. However, our current train is being routed to continue down the Morristown line, so our most favorable aspect, which you see above, is approach limited. Alright, this is the west limits of Roseville interlocking, so this is where the Montclair-Boonton line will join up to the Morristown line. As you can see, I placed a train here and routed him through as if he's joining the Morristown line. Your most favorable aspect when making this move is what you see here, medium clear. Moving on over to the Morristown line, I got a train routed here to go to Newark Broad. Your most favorable signal aspect here to enforce speeds on the curve is approach medium. A short distance west from the Roseville curve is Green interlocking, so this is the east limits of Green. There's some interesting behavior here because this is the start of Rule 251 territory. For those unfamiliar, and you can read the NORAC operating rules to see what Rule 251 fully entails, but essentially it's track signaled in one direction. Up until this point, this has all been Rule 261 territory, so track for bi-directional travel, it's signaled in both directions. Now you're going to have two tracks that are 261, meaning bi-directional, and then a track that is 251, meaning unidirectional. So if you are going against the flow of traffic in Rule 251 territory, you're going to always have a restricting cab signal because the track is not signaled in the direction that you're traveling, so it's always going to be restricting. Generally speaking, you're not going to be going the wrong direction in Rule 251 territory. So that's the only real thing to call out here. If you're curious, the track that becomes 251 is this leftmost track. So if you were continuing straight all the way through Green, you would have a restricting signal. So in reality, in normal practice, if you were going this direction up to Green, you would be switching tracks to one of either the middle track or the rightmost track in order to stay on a signaled track. And here's the west limits of Green interlocking. When continuing east, your most favorable signal aspect here, as you can see on this rightmost track, is approach limited. And that's to start slowing you down for the Roseville curve up ahead, which is 35 miles per hour. Continuing what I just mentioned about Rule 251, this is Rule 251 track right here, so if you were going against the current of traffic at this signal here at the west limits of Green, this is where you would enter Rule 261 territory and your signal would pick back up from restricting. On the opposite side of the signal bridge, at the M97 signaling point, this is going to be something that you notice as we continue west. The track that is Rule 251 will not have a signal in that direction that goes against the flow of traffic. So this is the flow of traffic going this way, east. Going west, it's against the flow of traffic, so there's no signal in that direction. Just something to note. From East Orange to Millburn, the signal setup is the same, essentially. You'll have block signals at predetermined points, and in between each set of block signals, you'll have one of those audio frequency overlay track circuits to control cab signals in certain situations. So, as an example here, I placed a train, just routed it up to the next station at Brick Church, giving me an approach signal here at the M101. And what will happen is the train will pass this point, cab signals will drop to approach, and then as the train gets closer to the audio frequency overlay track circuit, which is right here before the station platform, it's at this point the cab signals will drop to restricting before the train finally comes up on the stop and proceed signal at the M107 signaling point. So the sole purpose of the AFO, the audio frequency overlay circuit, is to drop the cab signals to restricting before the train comes up on the stop and proceed. Skipping ahead several miles to just before Milepost 16 and Millburn Station is the east limits of Millburn Interlocking. At this interlocking, the 3-track main will condense back down to 2 tracks, and Rule 251 territory will come to an end. In most cases, you'll be taking the 45 mile per hour switch here at Millburn, and will receive a limited clear signal as a result. If you're going against the current of traffic on this Rule 251 track right here, you'll be presented with a little dwarf signal, and you'll receive a restricting aspect, and your cab signals will upgrade to a more favorable one upon exiting the interlocking. At the west limits of Millburn Interlocking, the only real thing of note is that if you are switching to that leftmost track right there, that track does begin Rule 251 territory at that point. So if you are switching to that track here, you will receive a restricting signal aspect, and then you'll be operating against the current of traffic, and your cab signals will remain at restricting until you reach the end of the Rule 251 territory, which is at Green Interlocking. A lot of times as you play through the timetable, you'll have a stop signal coming into Summit, and there's a unique progression of signals leading up to that stop signal. You'll go from advance approach, which would be at the previous signal point I didn't bother showing. Then you'll come up on approach slow here at the M195. Now approach slow in this area is displayed as yellow over yellow. If you remember from the beginning of the video, approach slow in the Hoboken area was displayed differently because of 3 lights being used a lot. Well, this signal only has 2 heads, so you have to display it as yellow over yellow. This is the east limits of Summit Interlocking. Summit's actually broken up into 2 sections, Summit East, which this is, and then Summit West. It's like 2 parts. Anyway, since the switches here in Summit, I believe, are all 15 mile per hour switches, a lot of the signals around here will have 3 heads to display those slow speed aspects, such as slow clear and slow approach. With the next signal at Summit West being at stop, we have slow approach here at Summit East. Some of the signals at Summit Interlocking also have this C light attached to them, which indicates that the track beyond the signal is NORAC Rule 562 territory. In NORAC Rule 562 territory, you'll be controlling your train exclusively by the cab signals, as there won't be fixed wayside signals present. This is kind of like a cost-saving measure to railroads. It minimizes maintenance that they have to do to wayside signal equipment. Instead, they just have the track circuit down there, the associated equipment in the signal hut, but no physical signal at the wayside. So because of that, you have to control your train according to your cab signals. Now, what if your cab signals have failed? In that case, the dispatcher can illuminate the C light to indicate that the track is clear to the next interlocking. If you want a more detailed and thorough explanation of NORAC Rule 562, I highly suggest reading through the NORAC operating rules. Summit also has some unique dwarf signal behavior that I want to point out. Take, for instance, this signal at the west limits of Summit that is displaying limited clear for a straight movement. Not only is that weird for a dwarf signal to display, but it's even weirder for it being for a straight move. Not sure why New Jersey Transit decided to program this signal in this way, but it's very unique if you ever get to encounter it. Additionally, there is a dwarf signal at the east end of Summit that can display high aspects, such as clear, which would be green over green, or approach medium in this case, so just another thing to watch out for. The area of track between Summit and Denville is all NORAC Rule 562 territory. As explained before, 562 territory means that you're going to be operating the train by your cab signals exclusively. As you can see, there's no physical signal installed here at the track wayside to indicate how you should control your train. So it's just cab signaling. The signal point is just like any other. It's got the computer equipment in the hut. It has the impedance bonds that comprise the track circuit. There's just no physical signal at the wayside with lights and stuff. I should note that there are two interlockings in the Rule 562 territory on this route. One is named Drew, which is where we are at now. It's just a bit east of Madison. And then Baker, which is just west of Morristown Station. So that is the only time you'll ever have a wayside signal in Rule 562 territory, is at an interlocking. So I've set up a train here on the Denville curve here at Denville Station. We have a limited clear signal ahead. As you can see, this signal does not have a C light attached to it, meaning we are at the end of NORAC Rule 562 territory, and now we go back to Rule 261. I should note that New Jersey Transit will max out your cab signals within the vicinity of Denville at approach, which you can see right there. The reason they do this is to enforce the 30 mile per hour speed limit on the curve here. So when you're going east, coming from Dover, you will always have nothing more favorable at this signal than approach. Like, it maxes out at approach. You're not going to get a clear, an approach limited, or anything. It's always going to be approach here because they want to enforce that 30 mile per hour limit on the curve. Now, when you're going east, your cab signals will not pick up from approach until you cross that track circuit at Mount Tabor Station. Just wanted to make that known. There's nothing noteworthy signal-wise between Denville and Dover, except to say that this signal just before South Morris Street will pretty much always be a stop signal. The reason for that is if the dispatcher clears this signal, then the crossing gates at South Morris Street go down, and if you're just stopping at Dover and not going past the home signal, there's no need for it to be any more favorable than stop. There's no need for the crossing gates to go down at all. So in order to keep traffic flowing across South Morris Street, they set this signal to stop, and then you get your typical progression coming into the station. It would go from clear to advance approach to approach, and then a drop in your cab to restricting before the platform, and then you'd come up on the stop signal. So that pretty much covers everything on the Morristown line. Now let's jump into some of the Northeast Corridor stuff between Newark Penn and New York Penn Station. So I think it makes the most sense to just hop into timetable mode and observe the timetable in order to see how the signals behave between Penn Station and as close as we can get to Newark. So I'm starting here at the signals that go into the North River tunnels. And as you can see, there are those no fixed automatic block signal signs next to each of the signals, denoting that the track you are entering is NORAC Rule 562 territory. However, there's a bit of a deviation in that there's no accompanying sea light. And the reason for this is probably because there wouldn't even be cab signal failures leaving Penn Station. Like, if you had inoperative cab signals, you wouldn't even be allowed to leave Penn Station. So that's the only reason that I can think why you wouldn't have a sea light here at these signals, but just know that the track beyond is NORAC Rule 562. You'll have nothing except just track circuits in the tunnel, except if you're going in the eastbound direction. There is a signal about halfway through the tunnel, and it's a control point signal called CP mid, of all names, because it's in the middle of the tunnel. And it is a controlled point that you cannot pass if it is displaying the stop aspect. Don't think of it as like a stop and proceed. It is an absolute stop, as if it's protecting a junction. It's a controlled point. It should be respected as such. So once that AI train that's going into the tunnel there reached a certain point, the signal here upgraded to approach to facilitate the movement of the next train, whichever one is pulling out. We're not going to stay here to watch that, though. Oh, and the AI train pulled ahead even further, and that signal upgraded to clear. It's a very quick progression here. It'll go from stop, sometimes restricting, and then up to approach, and then straight up to clear. There's nothing like approach limited or advanced approach or anything. It's a pretty quick progression because they're trying to get trains out of the station as quick as possible. So once you're out of the North River tunnels and in the state of New Jersey, there are several consecutive, really closely spaced track circuits. This is part of the signaling strategy on this extremely busy part of the Northeast Corridor, where you have train after train after train. They create very small signal blocks and then create very aggressive signal progression, so signals get upgraded to more favorable aspects as quickly as possible. So you have this signal block as soon as you exit the tunnel, and then continuing a bit further west, you have yet another block point right here at Milepost 3.2. And then just continuing a bit further west, another block point at Milepost 3.4. And then you come up on the home signals for Bergen interlocking. This is a common occurrence, and you'll see it a lot between Portal and Swift, where you have tons of signaling points spaced very closely together, like I said, because of the frequency of trains that dispatchers are trying to get through this area at a time. It's not unsafe. There's still plenty of time to brake in case there is a train stopped ahead, but it is more aggressive than you see in other areas of this route. It's only been a few moments since I stopped recording that last segment, and already the home signal here at Bergen is displaying a cab speed aspect. Just a moment before I pressed the record button, it was displaying approach limited. That's how quickly things go around here. It's extremely fast-paced, and you never really know what to expect. There's tons of signal changes. I don't even know where... Oh, no, I see that train. It just came out of the tunnel. We'll watch it as it comes around the bend. I'm guessing since that you have a cab speed aspect here, I'm guessing it's going to be stopping at Secaucus and switching at Erie interlocking. Yep. So you have the approach limited signal here at Allied interlocking, which prepares the train to slow down to 45 for the next signal, which is at Erie interlocking just before the station. It's really, really cool to see all of this come together. We'll watch him go by. So right now he just passed a cab speed 60 signal, and then he passed this approach limited signal, should begin slowing down to 45, and then make his station stop. So I spawned into Secaucus at around 7 in the morning. There's an Acela that's approaching and just got within dispatch distance. That signal was just stop and proceed. Now it's approach. Be interesting to see the whole signal progression as it gets closer to the signal. Oh, there we go. Approach limited. As it gets closer, it'll upgrade to clear. There's a whole concept of dispatch distance. All the signals aren't dispatched out infinitely. And you got cab speed, and now it's clear. So it should be coming into view somewhat soon. Makes almost no noise, which is kind of scary. Looks like you got a Northeast Regional coming through. What signal aspect does he have? He's got approach limited, so he's following something. It's so busy around here, it's not uncommon to see those less favorable signal aspects. Oh yeah, you can see the lower level from down here too, which is pretty cool. I'm not sure what else I'm going to be able to capture right now. Oh, we have something that's getting routed onto track B. I just saw approach, and now it's cab speed. So there's something coming this way. Yeah, there's a lot of variety here. If you spend time here at Secaucus, you're going to see a lot of different things. I don't want to spend forever here, though, so we'll move on. So this is interesting timing here, as I'm just about to reach the end of the portal bridge. You can see the directional arrow there pointing right, meaning that that train is going to be getting routed down the Morristown line, which is pretty cool to see. I programmed those are pretty sweet. So I ran down to the eastern limits of Swift interlocking, where we see a cab speed aspect. And these are the other directional arrows that will point if you are going over to the Morristown line via the Kearny connection. So this particular train that is going to be going through the signal in a short while is not getting routed to the Morristown line because these displays are blank. Alright, I walked over to the other end of Swift interlocking. So this is the west limits of Swift, and this is where the Morristown line splits off and joins the Northeast Corridor. This is track 5, I believe, and the other side is track 6. If you're joining the Northeast Corridor at this point, you have the no fixed automatic block signal sign, as well as the sea light to indicate that you're now entering NORAC Rule 562 territory. Not really much else to see here, as there's no trains getting routed through the area at this time. If we take a look around, however, you can see the Morristown line that continues east toward Hoboken down there, across the water, and it continues underneath the highway there toward Dover. So now we're at the east limits of Hudson interlocking. I have a New Jersey Transit train heading into Penn Station, passing me right now, and on the opposite track, there is an approach limited signal for I don't even know what. That's pretty cool. Yeah, I can't even see that train coming. Oh, just upgraded to cab speed. So one feature about this area is that there's this track here at Hudson that connects down to Cape Interlocking, which is right before the Meadows Maintenance Complex. So if you have trains going from the Northeast Corridor down to the Meadows Maintenance Complex, they'll generally use this Cape connector track at Hudson. The dynamic weather unfortunately changed to rain as I walked from the east end of Hudson to the west end of Hudson, but here we are. Anyway, not really much to talk about here. We have some tracks in a yard area here that lead into Rule 562 territory, hence the sea lights and the signs. Train is getting ready to come through here, it appears. That was approach a moment ago, now it's approach limited. So even though this area isn't going to be played much by the player, all of these signals are programmed prototypically and behave exactly the way they would in real life, which is pretty sweet. As you can see, just upgraded to cap speed. Unfortunately, you're not able to access York Penn in this release. There's an invisible wall here at the curve. I'm not going to get into the details as to why York Penn is not accessible. However, I fully modeled the signal system as it should be in real life, so if you do want to use mods or some other means to explore that area and run trains through it, it's fully functional from a simulation perspective. You might just have some trouble getting there because of the invisible walls and stuff like that. In conclusion, I just want to simply state that I hope you guys got a lot out of this video and enjoyed the content. My goal with this is to ensure that you guys are able to operate on the route as authentically and immersively as possible, but if you have any questions or want to learn additional things about this subject, please don't hesitate to post in the comments section below or reach out to me on Discord. Thanks for watching.